You ever stop and think about, well, everything around us? I mean, cities, governments, writing, laws, all the stuff we take for granted. It all had to be invented somewhere, right? Well, today we're cracking open the original blueprint, the one that was drawn up over 5,000 years ago in a place called Mesopotamia, the land between two rivers. All right, so let's get right to it. The big question is, how did our ancestors actually pull it off? How did they go from living in these tiny, scattered farming villages to building the world's very first cities? We're talking places just packed with thousands and thousands of people. And here's the thing. The answer isn't just about, bricks and mortar. It's not just about the buildings. It's about a totally revolutionary design for society itself, a kind of blueprint made of interconnected ideas, where each idea solved a huge problem, which then unlocked the next, and so on, laying the foundation for pretty much every civilization that came after. So let's take a look at the first page of that blueprint, the birth of the city. Okay, just stop and think about this for a second. For these first cities, places like and Uruk, to even exist, they had to crack a problem nobody in human history had ever faced before. How do you feed tens of thousands of people who don't grow their own food? I mean, it's a total logistical nightmare. And the way they solved it, well, it changed absolutely everything. What they did was build something brand new, a powerful economic engine, all fueled by agriculture. It was this absolutely brilliant chain reaction. Okay, so first, they mastered irrigation. They figured out how to tame the rivers to get reliable harvests year after year. That created something totally new, a food surplus. We're talking way more food than the farmers needed for themselves. And that surplus, that was the key that unlocked everything else, because it freed people up. For the first time in history, a huge part of the population didn't have to farm. They could do other stuff. And that led to the final game-changing step, specialization. And this idea is so important, the division of labor. So instead of every single family having to do everything for themselves, grow food, make clothes, build their own hut, society split up into specialized jobs. You had priests running the temples, you had artisans making amazing pottery, soldiers keeping everyone safe, and scribes keeping track of it all. And they were all fed by that surplus from the farmers. It was a complete reinvention of how human society even worked. But here's the thing about big innovations, right? They almost always create new, even more complicated problems. Now you've got all this extra grain sitting around, and all these different workers who need to be paid with that grain. So a brand new problem pops up. How in the world do you keep track of all of it? Well, their answer to that problem was, you could argue, Mesopotamia's single greatest invention, a piece of technology so powerful it would literally change the course of human history. They invented writing. But get this, writing wasn't invented for poetry or epic stories. Not at first, anyway. Its original purpose was way more down to earth. It was invented for accounting. Seriously. It was for keeping track of grain, livestock, and who owed what. You could basically call it the world's very first spreadsheet. And what's so cool is you can actually watch this technology evolve over like 1,000 years. It starts out with simple pictures, right? A little drawing of a stalk of grain means grain. But that's not super efficient. So it slowly gets more abstract until it becomes this incredible script called cuneiform, made of these wedge-shaped marks. And the real genius of cuneiform was how flexible it was. It became this universal tool that people could use to write totally different languages, like Akkadian right there in Mesopotamia, or even Hittite way over in ancient Turkey. And this tablet here just shows you how powerful that final version was. I mean, think about it. What started as a simple way to track bags of barley became the literal operating system for an entire civilization. For the very first time, people could outsource their memory. They could write down complicated laws, run a huge government, and even record their own history. It was a total game changer. Okay, so you've got this powerful economic engine and this brand new information technology. With those two pieces in place, they built the next part of the blueprint, a social structure to hold the whole thing together. And their social blueprint was basically a three-level pyramid. At the very, very top, you had the gods. They controlled everything, the harvests, the floods, you name it. Each city even had its own main god, like the moon god Nana in the city of Ur. Then, on the next level down, you had the kings. They were basically the gods' representatives on Earth. Their job was to keep order and make sure everything ran smoothly. And then at the bottom, you had everybody else, the people, whose specialized jobs powered the entire system. And that connection between the kings and the gods got super tight. One Akkadian king, a guy named Naram Sin, he took it to a whole new level. He wasn't just content being the god's manager. No, he declared that he was a god while he was still alive. He called himself the King of the Four Corners, which pretty much meant king of the entire world. Talk about the ultimate power move, fusing politics and religion into one. And you can actually see this whole world reflected in their art. So look at the seal on the left. You see these powerful, almost abstract-looking gods. That's the top of the pyramid right there. But then on the right, you get a totally different vibe. It's a banquet scene with musicians playing. That represents the everyday life of the people, the artisans, the workers, the ones whose labor actually made the whole city run. But that big people category at the bottom, it wasn't just one big uniform group. And this is where the data shows us something really surprising. Check out this chart. It shows how many women were involved in sales contracts. Now look at that massive spike right around the time of Hammurabi. That's not a small number. It tells us that women, at least in this period, were major players in the economy. They were buying, selling, owning property. It totally shatters that simple picture of a top-down all-male society and reveals something way more complex and interesting. But this whole intricate, powerful system, this amazing blueprint for civilization, it had a weakness. A fatal flaw, really. The entire thing was built on one huge assumption, that the agricultural engine would never stop running. So let's take a look at the Akkadian Empire. This was the world's first empire. For over 150 years, they were the undisputed superpower in the area. And then, poof, it just collapsed. The whole thing vanished in the 22nd century BCE. And the collapse was so fast, so total, that it became the stuff of legends for the next few thousand years. So what happened? For centuries, the story people told, the one they wrote down in their texts, was that they were invaded by these barbaric mountain tribes called the Gutians. But modern science tells a very different story. The geological evidence, we're talking soil samples and rock layers, points to a different culprit. A sudden, catastrophic climate change event. A mega drought that went on for centuries. That would have completely shut down their agricultural engine, starving the cities, and just shattering the very foundation their entire empire was built on. And that brings us right back to the blueprint. You know, the design these Mesopotamians came up with was so good, we're still using huge parts of it today. Cities, specialized jobs, managing information. But the ghost of that first fallen empire points to the blueprint's fatal flaw. It's completely dependent on a stable environment. Which leaves us with a pretty chilling question, doesn't it? 5,000 years later, are our own civilizations built on a foundation that's really any more stable than theirs was?